Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Middleware Technologies. Today we'll be looking at another feature of Apache APISIX Gateway, which is request validation using a plugin. Okay, so here in this article we are going to use a plugin which is available in APISIX Gateway, which will help us in validating the request that are hitting the API gateway. Okay, so before jumping into the details of what exactly we are going to do in this article, let me tell you about what exactly is a request validation. Okay, so request validation is basically a process in which when a request is being processed to make sure the request body and the header content is as per the schema definition that we have provided for that. Okay, so let's say we have a application which is consuming and producing a JSON data. Okay, but in order to provide JSON data, we need to ensure whatever JSON data that we are providing it to that application, it is as per our specifications that we have defined for that application. Okay, because if the input JSON data is not validated, it might lead to various problems or vulnerabilities in the application that might be exploited. It might be SQL injection or LDAP injection, which can be triggered due to incorrect input validation that happens in the application. Okay, so in this article or in this video, we are going to see how we can carry out that request validation in the API gateway layer. Okay, so let us see how we can achieve this. So in our last video, we have seen how we can set up a basic APISIX gateway service using a Flask based application. So you can go through that blog which contains the details of how we can set up APISIX services, that is APISIX, APISIX dashboard and etcd, and what are the prerequisites that are required to set up that APISIX gateway services. Okay, so once your APISIX services setup is done, we can go with our next step, that is how we can carry out the request validation. So let me go into my shell. So as I have already discussed in my last video, I am using a Docker Compose file to start up the APISIX services. Okay, so let me start up the services over here. So in order to use the Docker Compose, so I need to have the Docker service up and running. So let me start up that service first. So I'm just removing the old containers that I have so that we can start up freshly. Okay, so this is the Docker Compose file that we have used in our last video. So it is basically the same setup. We are going to start up three services, that is APISIX dashboard, APISIX service and etcd. Okay, so let me start up this using the Docker Compose. And you can see the three services are up and running. Okay, so as I said, we are going to use see how we can carry out request validation in this tutorial. Okay, but before that, we need to have an application that produces and consumes the JSON data. Okay, so here in this step 2, we are going to make sure that we have Flask installed in our environment. Okay, so let me go into my Flask folder and I have already installed Flask, but if you haven't installed it, you can just install it using the following step. And once the Flask is installed, like, we need to create the following Flask application. So let me open this and show you what exactly is happening with this application. So this is a simple, very basic application based on Flask, which has a context of /post.json. So whenever there is a request coming on to this context, it is going to get the header type, that is content type, and it is going to check if that is application/json, and if that is yes, it is going to capture that JSON from that request, and it is going to return that JSON in the response. If it is not the type of JSON, the content type is not JSON, it is going to return this message that it is not supported. Okay, so this is a very basic application that we are going to use for this demonstration. So let me start up this application using the following command, flask app. So I'm going to start up this application, that is post.json. It can listen on any interface on port 2121. Okay, so let me start up this in the background. So as you can see, it is now running. Okay, now let us see the payload or the JSON data that we want to send it to this following request or this application. Okay, so this is the sample JSON data that I am going to send as a part of request. So you can see there are name fields, name, age and gender field, and in name we have multiple sub fields, that is first name, middle name and last name. So this is the very basic JSON data that we are going to use to send it to the Flask application. Okay, so let us try to send that JSON data as a part of request to the Flask application. So as you can see, I am using curl to post that JSON content to the following application, which is listening on port 2121 on context post JSON, and this is the JSON data which we are going to send. And as you can see, it has responded with the same JSON data as the response. Okay, so now we have validated our Flask application. Basically, it is accepting the JSON data and responding with the same JSON data. Now let us go into our step 3, that is creating an upstream for the backend Flask application. So this is the same step in which we are going to create an upstream object in API services, so that whenever a route is associated with that upstream, that request is going to be routed to that appropriate upstream. Okay, so let us first create the upstream. So this is the upstream that we are going to create. Let me clear my screen and paste that command. So here we are going to send the create an upstream with ID 3, and this is the API key which we need to pass as a part of authentication to this admin API, and this is the JSON body which we are going to send for this upstream, which is like we are going to send as we are going to create an upstream object of type round robin, and it is going to send that request further to the backend service, which is listening on port 2121 on the following IP address, which is in my case is the host IP address of my machine. Okay, but in your case it might be different. Let me create this one. So we have created the upstream, and now let us go into our step 4, that is creating the route for the backend Flask application. Okay, so route, as I said, in my previous video, it is basically the and place or a layer in which at which the request is getting filtered or routed based on the context which is getting requested. So let's say if we are requesting we are sending a post data with a particular context, that is going to be filtered at this layer and it is going to be routed appropriately to the upstream that is mapped to that route. Okay, so this is how we are going to create this route. So let me create this route. So here we are going to create a route with ID 3 and the same API key, and here the method is post, which is going to be a post request for that upstream application, and the host with which we are going to send this request is example.com, and the URL is going to be /postjson. Okay, so if these three criteria are going to be matched for the request, the API gateway is going to be forwarding that request to this upstream ID with upstream ID 3. Okay, so let me create this one. So we have created our route. Now let us try to test our backend Flask application using the API gateway service. Okay, so for that we are going to send the following post request. So let me clear my screen. So here we are going to send a post request with content type JSON and host example.com onto this following API gateway, which is listening on 9080 with context post JSON, and we are going to send the post data JSON JSON data which we have already seen. Okay, so in this case also we are able to get the response which is the same JSON data that we have sent to the application. Okay, so with this we can ensure that our APISIX gateway is routing the request appropriately from the API gateway to the upstream. Okay, so now comes the important part, that is related to the request validation. Okay, so for this so as in the step 6 we are going to generate the JSON schema for the payload. So what exactly is JSON schema? So let us try to understand that one. Okay, so this is my So as we have already seen, this is my JSON data. In order to generate the schema, JSON schema for this, we can use some kind of a JSON schema generated. In my case, like I have tried to utilize this schema generator. So let me open this URL and copy this JSON data for which I want to generate the schema. So let me copy this one and I'm going to generate the schema. It seems like Firefox is not working for me. Let me open this one in Chrome. Okay, so I have opened this online JSON schema generator in Google Chrome, and let me post this JSON data here, and let me generate the schema. So as you can see, this has created a schema for this JSON document. So schema is basically it provides us with the information related to what type of data is supposed to be sent as a part of that JSON data. Okay, JSON document. Okay, so if you can see, like the name property contains the name field contains properties like first name, middle name, and last name. This should be of type string. Okay, and they are the required properties. Like we need to send all these three as a part of the JSON. Otherwise, the JSON is not going to be considered as valid. Okay. Similarly, we have age and gender, which are of type integer and string, and these are all the three required fields that are supposed to be present as a part of this JSON document. So we are going to use this schema which we have generated, and we are going to use it in our route that we are going to update. Okay, so let us go into our next step, that is enabling the request validation plugin for route. Okay, so basically what we are going to do over here is we are going to use a plugin that is request validation, which is going to like process the request at the route level. Okay, so let me show you that post the following file, that is postdata.json.schema. So what we are doing over here is, so we are basically copying that schema that we have created for that JSON document into this place, the body schema. So this section. Okay, so this is the section that we are going to copy in the body schema section. So the other section that that I have, that basically is related to the route request that we are going to create. Okay, so if you go into APISIX documentation, and if you look at the getting started, you can take this route, basically the JSON data that we are going to send as a part of a route, and here like we are additionally creating a plugin section. We are updating this route with the plugin section after the URI. Okay, so if you see carefully, like I have updated, so this remains the same, but I have updated the plugin section over here. Okay, with request validation with the body scheme that we have generated over here in the generator. Okay, and it is going to send that route request to the upstream ID if the following conditions are going to be matched. These three conditions. Okay, so only thing that has changed is we have additionally added the plugin section in the route that we are going to create, so that it is going to act on the request that is going to be sent to the upstream object. Okay, so now we need to apply that JSON schema with the constraint. So basically, like we have generated the schema over here, but there is no constraint that we have applied. Okay, we have the only constraint is like we require all three fields, all the fields that are should be present in the JSON data. But let's say like the age field that we are going to pass as a part of JSON data, if the age field is going to be more than 100 or more than 100, it might not be a valid data. Okay, we want to constrain that value. So how we can do that? So we need to update our schema such that it accepts the integer type with a minimum value of 1 and maximum value of 100. Okay, so with this schema, when it is applied to that route, the request is validated against this schema. Like basically the JSON data that we are going to send is validated against the schema, and if the age value is more than 100 or less than 1, it is not going to accept that JSON data, and it is not going to send that further down to the upstream. Okay, so that is what the request validation is all about. We can similarly apply these kind of constraints for string type of data, for array data. So for that, like, we can go into so let's say, like, if I go into protect API. Okay, so this is basically a way to protect our API from incorrect data. So request validation is also a plugin which helps us in protecting our API from bad data. Okay, bad input data. So here, if you go into protect data and go for request validation, you can find different examples with this plugin, like which we can enable, and we can validate the different type of data, like enum validation, boolean validation, numeric integer validation. So this is the one that I'm using for validating the age data. Okay, so similarly, like, you have multiple validation configuration available here for ready to use. Okay, so now that we have understood about the JSON data and the JSON schema, let us try to apply or create that route with that schema. Okay, so I have already created that schema over here. So this is the schema that I am going to apply with this request for route. So let me create this route. So here, like, we are going to create a route with ID 3 and the API key, and we are going to put that JSON schema, like JSON, that route with that JSON schema. Okay, so this has created our route with the JSON schema applied in that. Okay, now let us try to retest the API services. Okay, first let us try to test it with our valid JSON data that we already have. Okay, so this is the same request that we are going to hit it again, like, after we have made the necessary changes to our route. Okay, so here you can see the request has been successfully served, and we are able to get the JSON data that we have sent as a part of this JSON document as an input. Okay, but now let us try to create another JSON input document, which is bad JSON data, in which I have updated the age as 120. So it is basically value greater than 100. So ideally, with this with the schema applied, whenever a request validation is going to be carried out by that plugin, that is request validation plugin, it is going to check for this constraint, and it is going to reject that JSON request that is coming to the API gateway, and it is not going to forward that further to the backend Flask application. Okay, so let us try to send the same curl request, that is to access the application, with a bad JSON input, that is bad JSON data. So here you can see, like, I have passed bad data.json file instead of the correct JSON data, that is post data.json file. So here you can see, like, we have got a validation failure error which shows the property age validation failed, expected 120 to be at most 100. So it is not going to accept any value other than the range from 1 to 100. So this is how, like, we can actually validate our request at the API gateway level itself before it is being passed on to the upstream. So there is no overhead at the upstream. That is one thing. And because, like, unnecessarily, like, we are going to like, there might be a chance of somebody creating bad JSON data and trying to hit your API services to downgrade or degrade that service. So that thing, one thing can be avoided. And another thing is these invalid JSON data can contain some malicious content or malicious script content. If these input or JSON data is not getting validated at the first level itself, it might get incorporated into your application, and that application, in this case like the Flask application, if it is trying to connect with a backend database with the following JSON input and trying to query the JSON trying to query the database, it is going to create a loophole for vulnerabilities like SQL injection and LDAP injections, right? So these things can be avoided with the following request validation, which will be like very much helpful for applications. Okay, so every application that is being built or being deployed, we need to ensure that the input validation is going to be happening at for the application. In this case, like we are going to validate the application at the API gateway level. So that is one layer of security that we are going to incorporate into our environment. But other than that, like even though the API gateway is validating the request, we need to make sure that even the application, like the Flask application, is also validating the request that is coming after the successful API gateway validation has happened, request validation has happened. So those things we need to take care, because web application security is the most important topic nowadays, because of the increasing vulnerabilities in the web application and the exploits that are taking place in this area. Okay, so this is all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you all. Thanks for watching this video. And lastly, I want to share this, like for every video that I am creating, like I am sharing a blog reference in the description of the video, so that you can. So this blog will contain the details about the source code or the commands that I have used in this like particular article or whatever article that I am preparing this video for. So it will be easy for you to refer. Okay, so yes, that is all from my end for this video. Thank you all. Thanks for watching this video, and you guys have a great day.